Hello. We have just started August, so it is time for the July yarn wrap up. Where to start? July was an interesting month, and I said in my last update that I wouldn't sustain the pace at which I was knitting in June because that was a lot of knitting for me with the time that I have in my life. And then July happened and David ended up traveling for work. So I was on my own to fill all of my leisure time, and I filled it with yarn. So I did indeed set a pretty brisk pace in July again, but I think we will likely be slowing down, which is a tiny bit sad because it's been exciting to see how many things I can work on and how many things I have completed, and so finished objects. I'm very excited about this one. This has been in progress for quite a few months at this point. I started it in May, I believe. So this is my filigree cami, and it doesn't look like a lot from the front. There are these panels of lace up the side, but the back is completely lace panels with these little buttons that I got from Brooklyn General. And it's all done. All the ends are woven in. It has been blocked. It is ready to wear. It fits me so well. I'm so excited about this piece. And yeah, it's finished, which is great. And it looks lovely. And I think there's hope that I can wear knitted things in summer, even where I live. So I am quite happy with this. So that's one that I finished. And then I finished my Hercule Poirot socks. So these are knit in Golden Age Studio Fibers in Mon Ami. It's the main color, and then the toes and the cuff I did in Little Gray Cells, and this was sock set, which was meant for to reflect Hercule Poirot. And so this is Library of Socks, volume 8, 6, 7. Smog was 6. Next month's cast on is 8. Well, August cast on is 8. This is 7. Anyway, so I had put them on the sock blockers to take a photo, and then I didn't want to take them off the sock blockers and mess around with sticking them back on the sock blockers before this episode. So I haven't done the ends, but there aren't very many ends in these, thankfully, and they'll be super quick to do and then block and then completely done. So they won't need to go into the bag of things to weave in ends on. And then we have my Knot Embassy Row vest. So, okay. I explained in the last episode what my plan was for this vest. And insofar as that, my plan has worked, okay? I used every inch possible to get a full row out of the body color, which is I used one end of the yarn for the main color and one end of the yarn for the contrast color as the pattern is written. So you just got the variegated plain off of itself instead of the way the pattern is written, where you have like windows of the contrast color peeking through kind of a rectangular border of the main color. So that was great. I used up the 100-gram skein completely. The way that the texture knits, it kind of goes like this. So I wasn't sure it was long enough. I did some math based on how much length is the top part of the pattern and how much length is the bottom part of the pattern, because this vest is knit from the bottom up. And I wanted to make sure that I had enough yarn left to do the top half. So I did a little bit of math when I reached the point in the yarn that I was like, I need the rest of it to make sure I get the top half done. That's where I stopped the body. And that was about 2 inches too short for what the pattern said. And the pattern would have, even at full length, would have ended up very cropped on me. I don't like high-waisted things. I like things that sit on my hips. So a lot of the cropped knitting patterns, I actually knit them longer because I want something that hits closer to my pant line or my waistband. Even if I want something cropped, I don't necessarily want an expanse of 4-6 inches of cropped. Like, that's just not where my clothes comfort is. Like, I like things a little bit cropped, like 1 inch or 2, or sitting at my waistband. So when I'm reaching doing things, I don't mind showing some skin, but there is a certain place where it feels the most comfortable on me. So the pattern was already going to be short, and then it was going to be shorter. And as you're knitting and the texture is like pulling the fabric up, I was like, this may end up being a bra. So I finished the top part of the pattern, and at that point I still had yarn left. So I went back to the bottom, I picked up my cast on edge, and I did the pattern some more before I went to do ribbing. Like, what you're supposed to do is, if you're gonna pick up that cast on edge, that's when you start your ribbing. I added some more of the body texture in. So by the time I finished the yarn, I was only about 1 inch shorter than the pattern said it should have been. And I was like, okay, we're gonna see how this goes with the blocking. I used, so this is a sock set from Dying Wishes Yarn Co. This is Tigger's Can't Climb Downwards, and then the orange is Tigger. And I used the mini for the ribbing. The pattern calls for 10 rows of ribbing at the hem. I put on 12 and pretty much used up all of my Tigger that I had. This is the smallest size in the pattern. So I would say, if you're going to get this out of a single sock set, you won't have any luck going any bigger than the very smallest size that the pattern comes in. And that would only be if your gauge is the same as mine or tighter than mine. If you knit looser than me, you will probably run out of yarn. So this may not be the project for everyone. However, it was fun for me to see if I could do it. And I am going to call this my failing upwards vest. So, Tiggers can't climb downwards, and apparently I can fail upwards. And this amuses me because of that sort of play there, and also because failing upwards is usually used for someone who is really, really bad at their job and continues to advance anyway. And it's never something that has applied to me. However, the universe seemed to be giving me some grace, because I think this vest made it pretty apparent how the state of my mental health was showing up in my knitting. This is a pattern where you work flat. Well, you work in the round first, and then you work parts of it flat. And because of that, in order to keep the texture consistent throughout the garment, there is a different written stitch instruction for when you're going in the rounds versus when you're flat, and this affects the knits and the purls. Okay, this makes sense to anyone who knows a reasonable amount about knitting, right? I read the pattern and I made a mental note to myself. Make sure you use the round pattern for when you're knitting in the round and the row pattern for when you're knitting flat. Great. Told myself, I looked at it, I was like, I am using the correct thing, let's go. I was not using the correct thing. So, this is a not embassy row vest. I follow the embassy row vest pattern, but I messed up the texture, and I basically used the row texture, which you should use when you're knitting flat, for the round. This impacts the way the slip stitches show up. And essentially what I did was there aren't enough purl bumps on the right side, and I wrapped the yarn in front of the slip stitches. So you have little bars across the slip stitches. And this is not how the pattern is supposed to go at all. The pattern is written so you have these lines of unbroken slip stitches and like unbroken, I think they should have been knit lines. Yes, I'm pretty sure. So the main color, the outer texture, is all knit stitches, and you've got the slip stitches forming like the vertical bars, and you've got the knit stitches forming the horizontal bars, and they basically form little rectangular windows that then your contrast color peeks through in purl bumps. Okay? Mine doesn't look anything like that. Mine has a texture all its own. So you can see here where I've got the slip stitches have little bars across them. And there are purl bumps, but it's not like a window pane texture. It's like a different texture. It's not bad, okay? And I think what saves me here is the fact that I didn't actually use a contrasting main color and contrast color. I pulled from opposite ends of the same skein of yarn. So if it was like a really high contrast main color, you would see that the slip stitch lines are broken up in a way that's kind of like weird, and you're like, oh, that's wrong. But because it's all the same yarn, it looks like an intentional texture. It's just a different texture. And I did not realize that I was doing this until I had knit the entirety of the body. And this texture took me so long and did not feel like it was growing at all. And I was like, I am not going back to the beginning, restarting this entire vest, having to rewind from both ends of my cake of yarn and doing that. And it's fine. What I did realize is I realized this before I started to work flat. So I essentially just adapted the flat parts to continue exactly the same texture that I had already created by doing things incorrectly. So the vest itself is cohesive through the whole thing, which is all that really matters, right? So it's an embassy row, except it's not. And also, I forgot that I was knitting a size 1, which is unusual for me because I fall about a size 2 in patterns the way that I like to wear my clothes. However, the amount of ease, like positive ease that this pattern calls for, I was like, no thank you. I would like it smaller, I would like it closer fitting. So I was knitting a size 1. I completely forgot this when I went to decrease for the armholes. So instead of doing the decreases for a size 1, I did the decreases for a size 2. And then I realized most of the way through those decreases, which there are considerably more of for a size 2 than a size 1, that I was doing the incorrect decreases. And then I decided that I didn't care. Because what was this going to do? This was going to make my armholes a little bit bigger. It ended up being 3 stitches on the front and 3 stitches on the back. And in the grand scheme of things, and then the gauge of this pattern, this was knit on size 3 needles with fingering weight yarn. I was like, 3 stitches, do we really care? So it was gonna pull in the back a little bit and make the back a little bit narrower. I don't care. I love a racer back. I love like a muscle tee kind of situation. It was gonna pull in the front a little bit, and I was like, am I going to get side situations that I don't love? But I'm adding ribbing. Worst case, I add a couple extra rows of ribbing because that's gonna grow this back out. And I was like, we don't care. We're not going backwards. I'm not redoing this texture. I'm not doing it. Part of that is because the slip stitches on the edges and the way that your yarn is managed throughout this pattern makes it very difficult for me with my level of experience to trace back and to tink back the stitches in a way that I'm sure that I have the stitch on the edge in the correct orientation and whatnot. And I was like, I'm just not dealing with it. So I went forward and I finished the vest. And I finished it and it was about this long. And I was like, well, it fits this way. I don't know how much of me it's gonna cover this way, but if I sort of pulled on it as if I was pinning it out to block it without even getting it wet, it grew substantially. And I was like, I think because of the way the texture is sort of like sucking it in, when I block out that texture and get it to lay like nice and flat and relaxed, we might have enough length for this to be like wearable and something I will reach for, as opposed to like only wearable on a day where I'm feeling very confident and very like, I don't care that 8 inches of my stomach shows today. And that happened. So we blocked it. It is magic. I have tried it on. It fits me. I got it out of 120 grams of yarn, which makes me so happy. Because I love a sock set, and sometimes I can't knit socks fast enough for all the sock sets, and sometimes I want to wear them in more obvious places. So now I have a pattern which one day I could do correctly. And I know how much it takes. I could get this out of probably a 50 gram contrast color and a 100 gram main color, because the main color takes more yarn than the contrast color. It's not a 50-50 split, which is why I didn't divide my yarn immediately in half and like cut it. I just pulled from both ends of the ball, and then I was able to adjust that midpoint. And honestly, at some point I was so tired and I was so stressed out and my mental health was not in a good place that I didn't keep track of when 50 grams of the main color was gone and like how much we then had to pull to make a main color. So I don't have a super accurate number, but it's more than 50 grams. And then I can do the ribbing out of a 20 gram mini. So this is like 170 grams if you want to have the contrast, or 120 grams if you're using a variegated and you just want the texturiness and to see what a variegated does when you pull 2 ends and you knit them together. So I'm super excited about this. I really love this. unusual color combination for like me, but I'm gonna wear it probably in the fall because it's a little closer fitting and the gauge is tighter, so the fabric is a little thicker. It feels a little too warm for summer weather here, but it's so fall. It's gonna be amazing. So I'm so happy with that. Okay, and that means that 3 seasons of Winnie the Pooh are done. And I only have 1 season of Winnie the Pooh projects left to go, and it is winter. We're gonna take a wee little break from the Winnie the Pooh projects. This was planned into my knitting schedule when I designed it at the beginning of the year, and it's staying. So my like winter Winnie the Pooh project will get started in a month or 2. I've rearranged a few things on the knitting schedule for reasons that we will go into. So, one more finished object. And by one, I mean there's 3 of them, but I made some more of my tiny pennants. So that one and this one. So these yarns are both scraps from the very first blanket I ever knit, which was a mystery pattern. And then I knit this one. And this yarn is called My Therapist Was Right About You. And it is one of the 2 colors that I knit my 2-color brioche travel shawl in. That goes with me on airplanes to keep me from freezing to death on an airplane. And so now I have 6 of these. I also finished making an I-cord. I did figure out my little cordsmith like tool, and I made myself an I-cord to drape around my travel knitting bag. And these are just safety pinned on right now because I'd like to decide what order to put them in before I stitch them on. But we'll have a space for a 4th one here, and then on the back side, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you're keeping count, that's actually 8. And I have 6 because I had 6 Pearl Scouts badges. So I'd like another 2 pennants before I go to Rhinebeck. But the problem is that I don't have any more DK scraps. I don't do a lot with DK weight yarn. And a lot of the DK weight yarn that I did do something with, I used up all of it because the tree skirt is probably the biggest DK weight project I've done. And I used up all of the yarn for that. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I have any scraps hanging around. If I do, they might be set aside for like if I need to mend it. And then this like stockings that I knit also are DK weight yarn, but that is also, the leftovers are set aside for when I get a 4th dog and I need a 4th dog stocking. And also to finish my duplicate stitch decoration on the stockings, and also if they ever need to be repaired, some of that yarn I can't get the colorways anymore, so like I set that aside. And I don't have any more DK weight scraps. So I don't know what to knit my next 2 little pennants out of. And I need to weave in some ends. But that is all my finished objects for July. Works in progress. I keep looking around for my coffee, but I actually drank my coffee while I was getting ready to do this, which was probably a good thing because it tends to get cold as I talk and I don't pick it up. But also I'm kind of like, don't have any drinks. But I do have yarn. Ooh. Also, I forgot to get that. First, okay, so I haven't shown you this bag. So this bag amuses me greatly. When we got our new bed and we got a new mattress because we were changing the size of our bed, and we got a mattress like cover, mattress pad thing to protect the mattress, and it came in this giant tote bag. And so now this giant tote bag is a blanket knitting bag because I don't own project bags that are large. So I commandeered this. And I have put a few rows onto my anthology throw. I introduced the Death colorway, and I'm in love with this color. Like I want socks out of it. I want possibly a sweater's quantity of it. I love this color so much. It has like so many of my favorite things in it. But we have gotten a few rows. Let's see if it will catch the light. You can see the difference between the tower and the Death on the edge. A little bit. But we're on row 104, and I think I'm supposed to change colors on row 105 or after 105, but I'm not going to because I like this color and I think the pattern was written so you would have some narrower bands of some colors and like whatnot. But I am adjusting a little bit where the color divides happen. So we have knit 4 rounds of this yarn. I know maximum I can get 8 out of the mini at this size. So I'll look at the pattern and decide how many rows of Death I want to knit, and then the next color will be the Empress. Yes, I remember that correctly. So heading into the purple direction. So not tons of progress, but I have worked on it a little bit. So I wanted to show that. The other thing that I've picked up and will be probably my morning project in August is the pink and purple Ansadora for my barista. So I think last time I took a work in progress picture of it, it was down here, and I've added a little bit, but she's still very smidgy and small. So I'm gonna try and get the increasing repeats done in August, the decreasing rows done in September, and then this will be done before I go off to Yarn Festival, and I can give it to my barista, and that will get that wrapped up. So that is in the downstairs bin. Okay, then we have, this is going to be interesting to show you because I'm doing some, again, yarn management, interesting things with yarn management, we'll say. Okay, so this is my stripy flannel, and we have a whole body. And I have started the ribbing on the body, okay? This is in Humperdinck, and just all I have left. So the body is supposed to, according to the pattern, have 2 inches of ribbing. If I do 2 inches of ribbing, if we make it there, I'm gonna be out of the Humperdinck colorway. And I really want the collar to be the same. I don't mind if the sleeves cuffs are different. And I have another Princess Bride scrap that I'm hoping will do the sleeve cuffs. But I decided to go pick up my neckline and leave the yarn attached to the body ribbing, start from the other end of the leftover yarn, knit the collar, and see how far I get. Now, the collar is supposed to be 3 inches of ribbing. We 100% are not getting 3 inches out of what's left here. I have like 4 grams. If that. I realized I didn't weigh this one, I weighed the other one. And 3 inches is to be a folded over collar. So like I could always put something else on the inside of the collar and you wouldn't really see it. So I might do that. But I do want the outside of the collar to be the Humperdinck colorway, or I can just do like ribbing and bind off. I'm currently toying with the idea of binding off in the main color. Your ribbing is supposed to be a contrast according to this pattern, but I don't think I would hate having like that little stripe of main color at the bottom because you have all these little stripes up here. And that's a possibility because I think the bind off is going to eat too much of this yarn. But we are playing How Do We Get Ribbing Out of Scraps, which is one of the games that I play, I feel like, fairly frequently on an Advent type project. But anyway, if the ribbing on the body ends up being a little short, I don't think that's going to be a big deal because the pattern has you knit the body of this sweater before the ribbing to the length that I would normally knit something finished. So I already have 2 inches longer than I would normally knit a garment. If I did no ribbing at all, it would be hit where I normally knit a garment. If I do 1 inch of ribbing, it'll be 1 inch longer than where I normally knit a garment. And I don't think I'm gonna miss the 2nd inch. So we'll see what the yarn tells me I can do. But I am very excited that we are pretty much on track with this project. I was hoping I would have the ribbing done, but honestly, like a 13 inch from the underarm body is already like I've knit the whole thing. And so I'm doing really well at keeping on track with this. This is a size 5 because I am not knitting this pattern to gauge. I am knitting this pattern in fingering weight yarn, which is not what it's written for. And I am knitting it on needles that correspond to that size of yarn, which again is not what the pattern is written for. So I, who would have knit this in a size 1 if I was following the pattern, yarn, and needles and gauge, am knitting a size 5, which also means a lot more stitches to go round and round. That is scheduled to continue into August. I will be doing the sleeves as well as figuring out my ribbing situation. And yes, then we have my Rhinebeck sweater, which last episode I was like, I am not doing that. And then Andrea Mowry released her Rhinebeck sweater, and I was like, but I want one of those. So I am knitting the Antipodes, and I didn't want to buy yarn because that seemed nonsensical to me in my situation, right? Like, I've never been to a fiber festival. No one at the fiber festival will have seen any of the things that I knit because I have such a low to no presence on the internet. And I think the knitting community is largely unaware of me. So whatever I wear will sort of be like new news to everyone, except Sarah of Dying Wishes Yarn Co., who I've shared all my pictures with. And I knit 80% of my things out of her yarn this year. But I really liked the Antipodes, and I was like, I don't have any sweater quantities of yarn in my stash that are not spoken for another project. And none of them are projects that I felt like disrupting for the purpose of this sweater. However, what I did have were 2 skeins of homeless spin cycle, projectless spin cycle. I should not call them homeless. That's not very nice. Projectless spin cycle, because spin cycle had done a run of their labradorite color, And that has some special significance to me, and so I really wanted that, and I picked up 2 skeins because they are 50-gram skeins, and I was like, probably need 2 to do some sort of color work. And that is enough spin cycle to do the color work on the antipodes. So I was like, okay, but I don't have a main color. So as I do, I came up with a mishmash plan. And my mishmash plan is this project list cake of Woolberry Fiber Co. This is the pollen colorway, which I got because of the name and because it's a gold, and I feel like golds are a continuing quest. And I wanted, my brain said it goes with a blue. And my brain said it goes with the blue from your Magpie Fibers Advent from last year. So the main skein from my Magpie Fibers Advent last year was a blue, and the Advent itself was all constellations, and it's meant to be knit into this cowl, which has the constellation colors done as color work in their constellations. And I'm really excited about that project, and I was like, that's what I'm gonna do with that yarn. But my heart said, this is the correct blue. So this is Midnight from Magpie Fibers and Pollen. And they're right. And then we have Labradorite. I feel like this was meant to happen. And then I was like, but that's still not enough yarn for this sweater pattern. And it's not like close enough that I can play, can I get the sweater out of this amount of yarn? So I was like, I need a ribbing color. And I decided to go with the leftovers of my Balrog color from Fantasy Fibers Yarn Co., which I used to knit my Duchess crew, and I have quite a bit of this. I have almost an entire skein of it left over, so all of my ribbing is going to be Balrog. One of the skeins of Spin Cycle I feel like contrasts with the Pollen colorway better because there's some very dark sections, and I think they would get lost against the blue. And then the other skein of Spin Cycle I have, I think will contrast better with the blue. So I've like paired them. And any section of the sweater that I work in blue, if there's contrast, it gets this one, and vice versa with the yellow. So let us actually look at what I have in terms of the sweater itself. So this is the back. I have not started the front yet. I have the saddles, which I have done in Pollen. And then I'm doing the back yoke in Midnight. And I have just started the color work in the back yoke. And actually, I'm ready to do the last row on the back yoke before you leave it on hold and start the front. So the tentative plan, if you're looking at the Antipodes pattern, is saddles in Pollen, body of the sweater in Midnight, and then sleeves in Pollen. And I'm rather hoping that I can get the first part of the sleeve where the contrast stripes are also out of the Midnight, or part of it. And then kind of transition to the Pollen, like maybe partway through those contrast stripes and down. And then all of the ribbing will be Balrog. We have yet to see if this works, if there's enough Midnight to do the body, if I have to get kind of crazy, but I hope. The other problem is that this was not a planned sweater. my knitting plans are planned, tentatively planned years in advance at this point. I say only having really been a serious knitter for 2 or 3 years at this point. And I mean serious, like I'm doing more than one large project a year. My knitting used to be one large project a year. And then if I did some other like small things, great, that was it. And a large project meant a blanket, or a large project could also mean a sweater. And then when I went through chemo, so 2023, 2022, I think I came up with the idea of the wedding temperature blankets, and that was a massive project, right? They're 2 essentially queen to king size blankets for beds. So that was a ton of knitting. And that was kind of like my massive project, right? And then when I went through chemo, and the only kind of like productive thing that I had energy to do was knitting. So I started doing a lot more knitting. And after that was the year of yarn hoard. So up to that point, I really only bought yarn if I knew what project I was going to do with it. Every once in a while, there'd be like an extra thing that got picked up, but really it was like, if I don't have a project in mind for it, I'm not buying it. And then I had the year of yarn hoarding after I went through treatment, and it was kind of like, so treatment ended for me in September. And I got several yarn advents that year for the holidays, and basically gave myself permission to, like, anytime I wanted yarn, I was just going to buy it. And it didn't have to have a project, and I was just going to be a yarn dragon for a year because it was part of what helped me get through cancer treatment, and was celebrating being in remission and having made it through that really hard time, and like embracing something that brought me like joy and comfort, and just having fun and like not restraining myself so much. So I acquired more yarn in between the end of 2023 and 2024, and this led to like all of these project ideas, and I really started like accumulating a Ravelry like favorites list, and saving yarn ideas, and like starting to follow yarn people on Instagram. And so then I was like seeing more things. So really it's been an end of 2023 until now where I consider myself more of like a serious knitter, where I'm really thinking about the future and doing projects every month rather than a project for a year, right? So to that end, I am a planner. I like to map things out. I like a plan. And my yarn plans are usually roughed out in advance. So I already have 2027 and ideas of 2028 worked out. By the start of 2027, I will have it like, here's what we're doing. Now, if something comes up and I flex that around, that's not a big deal. I'm not like, we have a plan, we must stick to the plan. The plan is so we have something there. I don't know. I'm able to be spontaneous if there's a plan. Same goes for travel. But the whole point of this is the Antipodes, a Rhinebeck sweater, was never supposed to happen this year. And that means that it needs to displace something off of my yarn plan. And I'm struggling with this because everything on my yarn plan for this year and next year are things I really want to knit. They're yarn I really want to use and see how it does. there's nothing that I'm like, oh, well, that was just kind of like a filler thing. Like, I don't care so much about that. But I don't think it's humanly possible for me to knit everything that was on my 2026 knitting plan and the Antipodes. And clearly, the Antipodes is happening, and it needs to, if it's going to happen before Rhinebeck. So, this is my August sweater to start. The Antipodes body, the stripy flannel sleeves, the two other projects that are sort of like I work on them when I can, but I'd like to make progress on them, and a library of socks sock. This means that the sweater that I was going to cast on this month is not getting cast on, which is making me sad inside because it's in this yarn and this yarn. I really want to make it, but also I can't have 3 sweaters going at the same time and maintain any sort of level of productivity for anything else in my life. I do have a job. I have a full-time job that I have to go to and I have to pay attention to, and is very high stress and makes me very tired. I also have a house. I also have a dog. I also have a husband. And all these things I want to spend time on, I cannot give all my time to the yarns. So these are destined to become an Eclipse of Moths sweater, which is a colorwork sweater. It is sport weight, so it might go a tiny bit faster than a fingering weight sweater. But you will see I have not caked these up. I told myself no. And then I told myself maybe because David might be traveling again. And then I said no. Work on the Antipodes. If you have spare time between the Antipodes and stripy flannel and the barista scarf, which you really want to get finished so you can give it to the barista in a reasonable time for fall and winter weather. And if you have spare time, work on the anthology throw, okay? Do not overload yourself by casting on yet another project. This is further reinforced by the fact that I don't have the needles to cast on the other project. So the Eclipse of Moths needs the 4s for ribbing and the 6s for the body. I have 2 pairs of 6s. They are currently occupied. In fact, I have 3 size 6 projects. So one of them doesn't have needles in it right now. And the 4s are in the stripy flannel and in the Antipodes. Technicality, because one of my pairs of 4s, like interchangeable 4s, I don't need for the stripy flannel anymore. I'm on the ribbing and then I'm on the sleeves, which I use my DPNs for. So like there is a pair of 4s free, but I still don't have enough 6s for all of the things. And I would either have to be swapping the 6s back and forth between my Aunt Sedora in the morning and my Eclipse of Moths whenever I work on it, which seems like madness, or taking them off of my blanket, or I'd have to get another pair of needles, but we'll put that over here. So I'm like a little bit sad because I told myself no more sweater cast-ons for August. And I really like that yarn. And I really want to touch it. This is the Starborn colorway. And then the lime green is a yarn that we picked up when we were in Iceland. I'm trying to work it back into the 2026 knitting calendar, but like down the road. And I've reworked the knitting calendar a little bit to try and accommodate for the fact that over October, we are not only going to Rhinebeck, but we're doing a little bit of a New England road trip. I've never been to New England, so I'm quite excited about that. But I need like Rhinebeck knitting / car knitting and not super complicated things or things that I have to carry bunches of yarn around on those trips with, because I'm going to be coming home with bunches of yarn. So we did a little rethink of the schedule, and we'll see how it goes and if I can squeeze this back in or not. But yeah, it's like, it seems like the right choice, but also it's making me a little sad. Anyway, let's move on from that, because the one thing that I will let myself cast on in August is my next library of socks, pair of socks, which is inspired by A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare, and I am using this, which does have stellina in it. And this is the mini from Long Dog Yarn's Silver and Gold sock set. This also has stellina in it. So these are my socks. I will be knitting the Rumpelstiltskin socks because I think the texture is very evocative of things that I think of when I think of Midsummer Night's Dream. So that is my sock projects. And that is what I will cast on in August, which leaves us with the bin. The bin currently contains my Melt the Ice hat, which should have size 6 needles on it and does not. But that's very good walking around knitting. So, and then we have my Scorpio. This is a Wally Breton in Dying Wishes Yarn Co.'s Scorpio countdown. And this just needs sleeves. It is on the knitting schedule to get sleeves before the end of the year. So have that puppy. And then I have the Voyage cardigan that needs surgery where I steeped it so that it's wearable. We have the Cozy McBlanket, which is on the calendar to be finished this year. We have the yarn left over from my NYX sweater, which I need to lengthen the sleeves on the NYX. That is also something that I said I would do this year. All of the leftover stocking yarn, as I discussed. Ooh. Ah, the tree skirt bits are in here. Okay, so leftover tree skirt yarn is in here. Oh, there's quite a bit of candle glow. These might be this might save my yarn pennant problem. What do we have? Okay, there's very, very little of that, so we won't use those. They have very tiny amounts in case I need to repair anything. But we've got a decent amount of candle glow and a decent amount of dragon scales. And I think these two will end up being my last two pennant colors. I was sad that I didn't have one in dragon scales, and now I can. Excellent. Okay, so yes, stocking yarn is just kind of living here. I probably, now that we've got bins for our stocking and tree skirt, I need to get this yarn moved to there so that it stops taking up room in the bin. Just gonna go ahead and set that aside to do that with. And then we have the Bone Season sock in here, which is also on the list for this year. I thought I was going to do it in August, but I have decided that my brain needs a break, as indicated by the Not Embassy Row Vest. I need to give myself a little space to wait until the right time to re-engage with that, which is me taking two different color work patterns, putting them together, and this results in me doing 3-color work. And I think I really need to do some ladder back jacquard because the floats in some areas are quite long. And I think especially in a sock, they would be served better with some ladder back jacquard, but I had never done that before. I have started doing it on my antipodes, so I now know how to do it, and I could do it in a sock. But there's a lot of things to figure out with that sock. Am I happy with the needle size that I'm knitting it on, etc., etc.? I think I probably need to knit the second sock and then decide if I'm pulling out the first sock. So I need to finish, yes, I'm on the ribbing. So essentially I need to finish the leg ribbing and then decide if this is good, or if this sock needs to be pulled out and started over. So I think I need to finish the ribbing on this so that I can cut my main color of yarn. And then I need to knit the second sock with better techniques than I knit the first sock. And then I need to decide if the second sock looks way better and like different from the first sock. Do we take the first sock and frog it and then reknit it? And these are things that I am not currently, I don't feel equipped to decide. So we're gonna leave that there. We're gonna leave it in sleepy time, and I will address it in, I believe, like post Rhinebeck. So November is when I put it back on the schedule. So I'm going to do my Midsummer Night's Dream socks in August, September, and then October we're gonna take a break because I will be going to Rhinebeck. And instead of DPNs, I would like to have hats, which I can do on circular needles. Don't at me, I don't like magic loop. I really hate it. I don't like small circumference circulars for socks. I like DPNs, and that's my preference. I also don't want to walk around with DPNs and actually accidentally drop one on a fairgrounds somewhere. So I feel like a circular project like hats will be what I am taking for walking knitting, which is great because I have several hats I want to knit for myself and also one for David. So that is that. That's the bit. Now, let us talk about what made a premiere last time. This bag of things that needs to be finished. It's much emptier. Okay, the smog socks are still in here, but one of them is done. I've woven in all of the ends. It is complete. So I have one more to go at the cuff and like do all of that. And then we have the shifty, which has a bajillion ends because it's an Advent project. And I did try to weave them in as I went, but the technique I use and the stitch pattern on this do not agree in all places. So I want to do some extra tending to these ends before I snip them all off. So that needs to happen. The only other thing is my Paul Klee. Look how nice it looks now. So the way that I approached this is I wove in ends that had nothing to do with the color work yoke. And so all the ribbing ends, all the body ends, like whatnot, and I blocked it. so that I wouldn't draw up any of the ends in the color work too tight. Now, this is probably, this is not the greatest color work ever in terms of like my color changes, and I think I left some things a little too loose, but it is blocked. It needs the yoke ends woven in, and then it will be done. And that is Winter in Narnia. Once stripy flannel is done, we have an entire year of Narnia done. And those are the only things that are in the finishing bag. So I really made a huge dent in the finishing bag, and I didn't add anything to it really, because the filigree is completely done, the knot embassy row is completely done, and my Poirot socks require minimal finishing, and those are going to get done first so they don't even go in the bag. So I am feeling great about finishing the things. And that leaves us with one thing to talk about, which is acquisitions. Which I forgot to bring out with me. I should have said acquisition singular because there's only one. So my Plies and Hellhounds Wheel of the Year Litha colorway came. I love it so much. I love it so much. Oh, look at all the speckles. So yes, Litha is here. Even though David did travel, he did not bring me yarn this time, but he got me another yarn adjacent present, which is very awesome. And I will talk about it at another time, but yes, I was not neglected. It just pivoted to a different thing, which is totally great. And yeah, that's it. That's the yarn wrap up. I am loving my slanty stripes tank top that I knit in Dying Wishes Yarn Co.'s Gemini countdown. And yeah, life has been interesting, but still here. The yarn is still here. Oh, and I think I'm going to do an extra little episode because August 9th, so a week from today that I'm recording, is Book Lovers Day. And as I have been knitting a library of socks, I thought we could talk about all the volumes of library of socks that I've knit so far. Because that sounds fun for me, and maybe it will be fun for you. So if it is, see you back for that. Otherwise, I will see you for the August update when it is time for that. Bye. Happy knitting.